if you're going to pivot, you have to leave other things. You have to leave the past behind. You can't
Yeah.
thinking about well, wouldn't it be great if I woke up this morning and I could see and I would become a pilot? If you even think about that in any way, you're not going to make it. So that's what I did. I pivoted. I forgot about that dream and I created a new dream.
Hey, Paul. Good
Hey,
to have you on. This is exciting for me. You're my first interviewee, so I'm really glad that I'm able to make time to speak. I'm going to give a brief introduction on Paul. I'm sure that most people who are going to be listening into are going to have heard or know of Paul, but Paul had an illustrious career in financial services, both at Morgan Stanley as well as at UBS. Long time at both of those organizations, where he ran a lot of the parts of wealth management, in many different kind of roles. So I'm not going to go into all detail. I'm sure some of it will come out later. But right now, he's the CEO of Vestra Capital, who makes strategic investments in RIAs. He's also, of course, a dad, very important. Maybe one of the most important roles that you play,
definitely
right?
most important.
Yeah. And what you also say that you're an optimist, which is, I think, one of the things that you and I share. And that's why we always love connecting and talking about the future, because we think of a positive future.
Sure.
You're also a bookaholic, and a novice stoic. So these are also things that we share. Both you and I love reading. And many years ago, I started reading about Stoicism. I don't know if you can ever become a professional Stoic, but yeah.
I don't know either, but I'm really glad that both of us found it because I think it's particularly relevant in Wall Street, particularly with the volatility of what happens in the market and the difficulty of being successful in Wall Street. There is always something to change it.
Yeah, for sure. What I really was interested in talking a little bit about your childhood and your upbringing. Right? When you look back, what was the experience or lessons from your childhood that really helped you deal with challenges or transitions? Right? Or maybe, were there some experiences that made it harder for you?
My uncle, my brother, my two brother-in-laws, all pilots in the Navy. I went to school at the Naval Academy, as did my grandfather and father. What it taught me, because we moved every year, and what it taught me, and it's probably the thing that has made me most successful in my career, was embracing change. I can walk into a room anywhere in the world, that is speaking any language, and find a way to communicate with people and make a new friend. And I've done that forever, and I think it really helped in Wall Street. It's another thing of, like, if you don't embrace change, you will not last long. All that stuff teaches you you deal with the circumstances and you move on. There is always somebody who has a bigger challenge than you do. And I count myself as being incredibly lucky to have the parents and the upbringing and my siblings that I had.
Yeah, well, that resonates with me a lot. I've lived in a lot of parts of the world too, and I had to adopt. And it does make things a lot easier when you have done it as a child all the time. It's just the norm, right? I think for a lot of people, that's very hard change because they haven't really experienced that much change.
I think also living in different countries
Yeah,
allows you to appreciate other cultures. It allows you to, you get new food. I mean, who wouldn't want to have all the Spanish? And I also lived in Italy, which I know you know, and having great food there. The way everybody sees the world is different than they see it in America, which is very American centric.
yeah,
There's really actually no, I don't think there's anybody like the American experience, and I love my country and I loved serving it. But I also loved figuring out that there were other people and they were smaller. Europe is a perfect example, right?
right. So let's talk a little bit about some of the pivots that you've made in your life, right? So all this had really prepared you to be able to do that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about one significant pivot that you had made and the decision process that you went through it, because I think a lot of the listeners are struggling with that, right? Yeah.
The first one that I pivoted, I mentioned that everybody in my family every one of the males was a naval officer, as was my sister, by the way, and all of them successful, and they were all pilots.
Hmm.
And all I ever wanted to do, I knew when I was 4 years old that I was going to be a Navy pilot. Of course I was. Everybody was. Unfortunately for me, and I went to the Naval. I had decided when I was 7 I was going to go to the Naval Academy. I didn't apply to anything else. I'm going to the Naval Academy. That's where I'm going. I'm there, and lo and behold, we find out I'm a mutant, and I don't have eyes that work like the rest of the hatches. The day I committed, the next
Hmm.
day I found out my eyes weren't good, and I would never be a pilot because there was no LASIK back then, and you had to be perfect, and I wasn't, and I knew that I had 8 more years that I had already committed to the Navy, and that was where I was going to be. And the things that I used to laugh about, which were the people who were on ships. Why would anybody go on a ship when you can be a pilot? And I had to literally, I had to pivot and think about that. And ultimately, I spent 6 years as a surface warfare officer, going all over the world. It was fantastic. I learned so many things. I got in the Black Sea, stared down the Russians. If you're going to pivot, you have to leave other things. You have to leave the past behind. You can't
Yeah.
thinking about well, wouldn't it be great if I woke up this morning and I could see and I would become a pilot? If you even think about that in any way, you're not going to make it. So that's what I did. I pivoted. I forgot about that dream and I created a new dream. Ultimately, I ended up in the financial services business. I interviewed with one firm. I remember them saying, like, what other firms are you interviewing with? And I said, I'm not interviewing with anybody. I found out you were the number one firm. That's where I'm going to work. Well, what happens if we don't offer you a job? And I said, don't be ridiculous. Of course you'll offer me a job. I'm perfect for this role. And so I did. I got in and I was an advisor and I really enjoyed it. But what I found is I needed something more because
Hmm.
one of the things that when you go in the military is the mission is bigger than you. You learn that and you learn being part of a team and you learn that the individual is not the most important thing. I pivoted. I took a 30% pay cut to go from being an advisor because I was successful to being a manager because they don't pay new managers very well. I gave up my book, which anybody who's in our business knows, like, oh my God, that's your that's your safety net, and it turned out very well. Ultimately, it was very difficult the first couple of years. One of the things I learned in that is which you'll recognize from Stoicism is the obstacle is the way, and if you're going up a hard path, there's nobody else with you. That's what you want to do. If everybody's going the same way, not so much. So I learned that first time I made that big pivot that I gave up a lot of income for 2 years, and 3 years into it, I made more money. And 5 years into it, I made twice as much money. And it's not about the money, it's about the opportunity and the impact that you can have. And I made another change after being in as a branch manager. They called me and said, let's come to New York. And I said, well, no, you don't want to come to New York. That's even further away from the sales. That's the dumbest thing that you could do. So I gave up a 40% pay cut. I moved to New York, which is a heck of a lot more expensive than Michigan. But once again, I did the same thing. I put behind my previous dream. I created a new one, and off I went. And I think that's what you have to do. You have to, if you have discipline and you have good habits and you believe in yourself, then bet on yourself.
Right.
And I think the challenge that some people have is it feels too dangerous, too risky, and it's only those who risk, only those who are brave and seek out new opportunities. Without that, if you don't feel uncomfortable when you're doing those things, you're probably not going to you're probably not going to be successful. It's like learning to ski. You can't learn how to ski being on the bunny slope the whole time. You have to go up and guess what? You have to fall, and you have to fall hard. And after you fall hard a bunch, you learn how to ski. And so I always looked at it as, okay, I'm going to learn how to ski. It's going to
Yeah.
hurt, but at the end, I'll be better.
I think that that's a really important lesson for anyone who is listening, because I think a lot of times people just at the downside of losing their current job or having less opportunity now. Instead, I think what you've done is you've always looked at the upside, focus on the upside and say, I'm going to bet on myself. And yes, I'm going to be able to do it. And this is how I'm pivoting and this is what I'm going to do. And I think that that's a really important lesson. I think a lot of people are struggling with that today.
I think that's right. The last pivot I made was 4 years ago. The left, I had been on the operating committee at Citibank Global, Morgan Stanley Global, where I was vice chairman. I'd been on the board at UBS Americas, and I quit. And I quit because I was tired of being in really big places, and I was tired of not having the challenge that I wanted. So I went out on my own. I went from being in this huge global company to a company with three people. That was very different. Company with three people, no income, and formation, of course, no prospect. And so, learning how to take something where there is nothing and creating it as entrepreneurs do. And I'm still in my journey, but every day I wake up, I'm really happy. I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but I wake up every day and say, but it's all about what I can do for other people. And I don't have to worry about 100 people who might want to do it this way and 100 people who want to do it that way. I think an entrepreneur is the best job that you could ever have. I felt like I really needed something that I could control. I also wanted to have an impact. And I felt I had spent 40 years gathering knowledge and wisdom, and I wanted to execute on those. The last thing I'd say is like, well, I learned but when you want to do something and feel like you're changing the world, can't do that in a big company. That's not what that's for. So I became an entrepreneur and I built a company with a few friends. You can also look at yourself and, if there's any self-doubt, don't become an entrepreneur because every day there's a little devil in your ear saying like it's never going to work. And the only way that you can become successful with anything that's difficult is commitment. It's just full commitment. The second you say, well, should I do this or not do this? You're sunk. It's just not going to work. And it was similar to the other pivots that I'd made, which is you don't get to, go back there. Once you leave, you leave. And
Yeah.
going back there isn't good for you and it isn't good for the people that are back there. So
Right.
you learn from those opportunities, but you don't go back. You can't be
Yeah.
present and you have to be present, right? Like being an entrepreneur, changing the world is about what you're doing today. And you got to get up every day. Like I know one of the reasons you and I enjoy each other's company because we get up every day with the same idea. We can change the world. We really can. It really doesn't matter how many people tell me that I can't. I learned long ago that I don't listen to my skeptics and I don't listen to my siblings who are always skeptics. Skeptical. But I wake up every day going like, I'm going to go talk to Steve because he's going to make me, he's going to make me get excited again about the things that I'm doing and he's doing and other people we know are doing. And, that's what I would encourage anybody who's listening to this. Hey, find those people in your life that you get excited about every time you talk to them. And you never walk away from it without like a smile on your face saying, that guy's a great guy and he's pretty smart. And so you find those people in your life and truthfully, no matter how long it's been since you had conversations, you usually pick them up pretty quickly. And you remember that's one of those people in your life that makes you better. I'll remember to call him next year.
Yeah. I went through something similar where early on in my career, I built a big network of people. And I built it because I needed those people to be able to get done or clients or whatever it was. And then a number of years ago, I decided that I was no longer going to invest in people who I don't actually enjoy spending time with. And I think you talked about that as one of the pivots. Can you talk about that? Because I think that a lot of people have a lot of very superficial relationships because they always want something to beneficial out of that other relationship. And so they don't really enjoy most of the relationships that they have, and they can't get very deep because of it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of messages in there. One of them is, first, if you have anybody toxic in your life, personal life or business life, you have to cut them out. It's one of the things that when I did training, and I said one of the best things you can ever do is to fire a really important client. And I had to fire an advisor who was number two in my office. And I actually, when I called my boss, she said, no, you're doing the wrong thing. I said, but he lied to me. And he lied to me after I gave him several opportunities. How can I have to supervise this guy. Now, the only thing I would tell you is the only thing I wish I'd have done different was I should have resigned that day. I didn't. And that person was changed 3 months later. And I called up my new boss and I said, I can't do this anymore. I have to terminate this person. And if you don't want to support me, I understand that, but I need to go do something different because I can't have that person in my office. I did that, and I thought I was gonna have trouble with the other advisors. Every one of them, including his best friend, walked into my office and said, "You did the right thing. We're proud that you hold high standards here, and it's important to us." And so that's the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is, like, people think relationships about getting things, and relationships are about giving things. And the relationships that you have you don't hold a ledger, right? Like, one of the things, Steve, you and I don't do is we don't hold a ledger. We don't say, like, hey, I called you, or I did this, or I did that. We don't have that ledger. I don't need a ledger. You know, you're my friend for life. And I know it, you know it. I feel it back with you as well. So I don't think about what I can get from you. I think about, what can I do to help Steve? And what I find is, when I do that, I get much more coming back than things. I have a massive network, and I know you do too, for the same reason, which is we always go into those things saying, like, what can I do to help you? And that's the most important thing that you can do to establish really strong relationships is, first, make sure anybody toxic you get rid of, period. If you wait one more day, you're waiting too long. The second thing is you give, and you give. And one day when you really need it and you don't even have to ask for it, you get it back. And I think you can't pivot if you don't do that, because pivoting requires a lot of people around you, because it's lonely. It's a really lonely journey when you start something that's new, and the self-doubt that is there is prevalent every single day. The confusion and uncertainty is there every single day. And so the way you get through that is you have really strong relationships across the board, whether it's work or otherwise. And you have those conversations, and those people remind you, hey, you're pretty smart. You're pretty smart, Steve. You know, I know you just did this project, and I hear what you're doing up. Everything I've ever seen you do has been successful, and I bet that this one is going to be as well. You might slightly alter your path, but, I believe in you, and you could too.
I think that there's a lot of truth in that. I think that networking is very related to friendships. It's good networkers are able to build friends, as you said, for life. And I think that that's something that a lot of people don't take that approach, and that makes it very hard. And then they end up having a loose network of people that don't help them when they need really help. So a lot of the advice that I'm giving people that are out of a job is stop looking at Indeed. Speak to your friends first. People who actually really care about you and they understand the value that you can bring to the table. And so that is, I think, a really important lesson. Traditional 9 to 5 anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
At a big company, but we definitely want to still be engaged and do it as good as we can. So as long as we can.
Yeah, for sure. If you haven't found something you're really good at, don't worry. Look for something that you really like, and then you'll find a way to make it really good.
Yeah. Well, Paul, it was such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for sharing about your life and the lessons that you've learned. I hope that it will be useful to a lot of the people that are listening. And it definitely
Thanks,
was useful to me.
thanks, Steve.
Thank you for Thank you for your time, and we'll talk very soon.
Okay. See you. Bye-bye.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Midlife Remix. Today I want to talk about pivoting, something that Paul touched upon in our last episode. Let's do a quick exercise together to help you pivot with intention. Step 1, let go. Think about a goal or dream you've been holding on to. Ask yourself, does this still align with who I am today? If not, it's time to let go. Please write it down, acknowledge it, and permit yourself to move on. Step 2, define your new direction. Now, think of a new dream or direction that excites you, what's been quietly pulling at you. Write down, be specific, what steps would it take to move towards that new goal? Don't worry about perfection, get it out there. Step 3, take action. Pick one small step this week to move towards that new direction. It could be reading, research, or reaching out to someone who inspires you. Just one step. Embracing a pivot starts with small, intentional actions. Let me know how it goes. Until next time, keep moving forward and embracing the change that's right for you.